Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen on air or online at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, or nccradio.org. And also you can download our award-winning WHPC app and listen to all the great shows here on WHPC. Herbally Yours consistently brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And today we have as our guest Sally Fryer Dietz, and she is the founder and director of Integrative Pediatric Therapy and Integrative Concussion Therapy in Dallas, Texas. Sally lectures and teaches nationally and internationally on sensory integration, developmental therapy, craniosacral therapy, concussion rehabilitation, and the efficacy of combining traditional and alternative treatment modalities. She has written 2 books. One is called When Kids Fly, Solutions for Children with Sensory Integration Challenges, and Sensory Processing Solutions, Drug-Free Therapies to Realize Your Child's Potential. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sally.
Thank you, Ellen. It's great to be here.
Now, you have so many letters after your name. PT, DPT, CSTD, CLC, and SIPT. What are all those things?
Well, there's physical. I'm a licensed physical therapist, but I also am a doctor of physical therapy, and I'm a diplomat certified craniosacral therapist. I'm a lactation counselor, and I'm certified in sensory integration and praxis testing. There's a whole bunch of other ones. I just don't include those.
You run out of lines, but obviously you are a learning addict, as I am. So
absolutely, and I have many years of experience behind me, so you tend to gather more things as you get older.
But, it is interesting because in terms of, let's say, one of the things I do a lot is counseling with individuals who would like to do natural interventions as part of their professional life. But it's so important what you have here because like the PT and the DPT, those are recognized licenses in most states. Well, the certificates might be great in terms of increasing the amount of knowledge you have. Those things really help you to practice and help people.
Yes, and really it was, through my physical therapy license that I became so interested in some of these other things because the tools and techniques that you learn through mainstream medicine, those are all very important, but there are also other complementary tools that can really enhance everything that we do in sort of the mainstream world.
And something like craniosacral, tell us about that.
So craniosacral therapy, when I first heard about it, it was in actually 1995. And I had a friend and colleague who worked with a lot of autistic children. She encouraged me to learn about craniosacral therapy. And I couldn't really understand how light touch could really make a big difference since I was a physical therapist. And we're used to, working with bodies and kind of making them do what we think they should do. At least that's how I used to be back in the early days. But I went and took a class so I could tell people why I did not think it would work, because I really couldn't imagine how this light touch would work. And after that first class, it was taught by a physical therapist, so we were speaking the same language. I realized there was definitely something to this. It was a lighter touch, but when you blended your hands or your touch with somebody else's body, there are a lot of things that begin to show themselves to you as a therapist that allow you to really get even more change from someone. It's hard to to explain it
Well,
over.
because it might move more into like the energetics that are picked up through the neurological system.
Yes, and everything is energy. So anytime, you talk to somebody, you touch somebody, you're certainly moving energy. But this is actually based on true structure. Your hands are on an individual, and we're really feeling for the tissues to relax under our touch. And when you do that, the body doesn't run from it, if that makes sense. Even with a massage, when you put pressure into the body tends to kind of recoil when you get into a real sensitive spot. With craniosacral therapy, it is so gentle and so non-invasive that the autonomic nervous system truly relaxes under that touch when it's done correctly. And when you get that kind of down regulation of your autonomic nervous system and your parasympathetic, which is the relaxing part of your nervous system, kicks in more, you get a very deep, deep relaxation, and those tissues continue to kind of shift and change. It's not something that we're getting in there and manipulating at all. We're really enhancing that individual's ability to make corrections within themselves. And as a result, when the treatment is over, the person has a profound sense of just their body has really shifted. And when back to when I first took that very first class, part of that class was working on other people and having other people working on you. And I didn't know how to explain it way back then, but I definitely knew there was something happening in my body that at that time I really did not fully understand. But it just, set things in motion for me professionally to learn more and become really a true professional working with this system, because I just feel like it enhances everything else we do in therapy. It's really been an incredible tool to have to work with children and adults on many, many different levels.
Well, in your book, Sensory Processing Solutions, Drug-Free Therapies to Realize Your Child's Potential, is that one of the things that you discuss?
Yes, it is one of the things I discuss. There, as a therapist, especially as a pediatric physical therapist, the more tools you can bring to the table to help somebody, the better off you are and your patients are. I really feel like there's no cookie cutter approaches in therapy. Definitely not in working with children. And we really need to treat what we find. And if you have a combination of therapies at your disposal, you can use different things at different times to make a greater impact on bringing out the best in that individual.
Now, you're also talking about integrative concussion therapy. And so what would concussion fall under? That could be in adults as well as children, right?
Absolutely. We see adults and children for concussions.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. So even though your center is called pediatric, you do extend it in the concussion area too to adults.
Correct. Yeah. We actually it's really two different practices under the same roof. There's an integrative concussion therapy and there's integrative pediatric therapy. What's really interesting about concussion is when you have a head injury, a lot of the same sensory systems are disrupted as in a child with a developmental disability or a child who has sensory integration processing problems. So when we're looking at treatment, we're working with the same systems. We're working with the vestibular system, which is your balance and your coordination, and we're working with your visual system, which is how you perceive things, how your eyes are working together, how they team together to get things done. And so the concussion piece, people do really well when you address those underlying sensory systems that are disrupted by a different cause or a different etiology than the developmental pediatrics, but same kinds of treatments, just geared differently for a different age.
So what would some of those treatment modalities entail? So
for concussion therapy, the craniosacral therapy is kind of our number one go-to, because when people have a head injury or concussion, they don't feel good. A lot of them have headaches. They have foggy thinking. They just feel a little bit out of sorts in how their body is working. And the cranial work really helps to, again, bring that relaxation and allow those tissues to relax, and how you allow your cranial system, which is the fluid that surrounds your central nervous system, to balance and work more effectively, so you don't have the same kind of tension patterns. So with one treatment, even, the person feels so much better. So we use the craniosacral therapy for almost all of our concussion patients, or we strongly recommend that they try it. We'll do an evaluation that looks at what's happening with the vestibular system, where we have very sophisticated tools to evaluate balance and, where are you carrying your weight. It's not uncommon after an injury for somebody to carry their weight too much forward or to one side or the other, so they're at a greater risk of falling, again, or having another injury. It also affects your coordination, your bilateral coordination, and how you're, using your body altogether, which again can set you up for having another injury. With concussion, the first 3 to 4 weeks after a concussion or a head injury, you are most vulnerable to sustaining another injury, because your vestibular system and your visual systems may be out of balance a little bit or a lot. So anything that you can do to protect yourself from having another injury is to your greatest benefit, because it's usually that second injury that really takes you out and really causes some long-term problems. Well, so we're constantly looking at all these different systems.
It's so fortunate that you're there. Now, you're in Texas, and, you're calling your center integrative. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the laws in Texas, because they really vary state to state in terms of how they view, let's say, something that would be considered conventional versus something that would be considered integrative.
Okay. So it's called integrative because we're actually all licensed therapists, licensed physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists. It's integrative because we all work together. When we have children, it's rarely just a speech problem or just an OT or PT developmental problem or sensory processing problem. And we can really help kids maximize their full potential by having all these different disciplines able to work together in the same place. It helps parents. They don't have to drive all over town to get their different services. You have input from different professionals when needed. And then within each of our professions, we are trained in a variety of different tools, as we call them, whether it's craniosacral therapy or feeding therapy or scoliosis, treatment or concussion rehab. Those are all subspecialties that we're able to bring together, again, when needed, depending on what the circumstances are, for the individual that we're working with.
Well, that's great to have that all together. And I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen live online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio or any podcast venue of your choice. And our guest today is Dr. Sally Fryer-Dietz, and she is the author of Sensory Processing Solutions, Drug-Free Therapies to Realize Your Child's Potential, brand new book in 2023. So, Dr. Sally, what about with children who have something like ADD, ADHD, and they're automatically put on pharmaceutical therapies?
Well, that's really why I'm here. I started my clinic in 1994 for my own child, who was 6 years old at the time. and was diagnosed by his pediatrician and as having ADHD. And at that time, all they had to offer was medicine. And I was married to a physician at the time, and so there was a big push to do that. And I saw my little exuberant boy become almost automated in his learning. He would certainly sit there and attend to anything they wanted at school, but he became more depressed when he came off the medicine. He became emotionally, labile. And the changes that I saw in my own child really disturbed me. And he was a smart little guy. He was going to a private school. He did not qualify for any kind of school services because, a lot of kids with ADHD don't. And I had been working in developmental pediatrics in California before moving to Texas. And I knew about sensory integration, and I knew, we worked with children with attention problems and, different developmental kinds of issues. And I could not find anybody who was trained to do what I actually had done in California. So I opened my clinic for him and other kids like him who were primarily young children who were being misunderstood at school and were not given the opportunity to develop their own neurotransmitters to be more successful in school. So, that's really, where I started. I couldn't be his therapist because I was his mother. It's a very different relationship. Anybody out there who's a mother of a child who takes extra attention knows that, we tend to be able to, mind read our kids almost and sometimes do too much for them. But a therapist can relate to that child on a slightly different level and can really help to bring out the best in them where they do have to work a little bit harder.
And it's great that you call that in your book drug-free therapies, because I think that would catch the attention of many parents facing that.
Yeah, I think, medication should always be a last resort. There are certain things that absolutely you do need medication for, but there are, too often it's used as a quick fix, and that's, not fair to the kids. I don't think. I think we should give them every opportunity, especially these young children. Even it's gotten a little bit better, but even when I started back in the 90s, I was seeing 3-year-old children on medicines, for attention, and they're 3. They need to be, we need to see how they're processing information in the world, and there's so many other things that you can do to, help them. So that's really how I started. I firmly believe that based on, all the kids that we have worked with over the years and seen all the successes. And there really is so much more that you can do beyond medication. And, I think in a perfect world, we want to give our kids that opportunity.
Certainly. And people can find out more. By the way, if you're listening to our show, then go to our archives, and we have a lot of live links so you can get right to Dr. Sally's information, or look for I, P as in Peter, T as in Thomas, Kids. Because you have a website, iptkids.com. You have Twitter, iptkids. So it seems like a good place to find you. And
lots of information out there. So
that's wonderful. So what are some of the things that parents could do to actually, look into some ways that they could help their children with this?
Well, I think, what I tried to do when I wrote, especially my latest book, was to let parents know these kids are, number one, they're not broken. We all develop along the same lines. We all need to have sensory motor experiences that help to build our nervous system. So that affects all of us, no matter what age, where you are in life. But you think about a child, especially a young child, things are growing and developing very, very quickly. So being able to provide children with lots of different sensory motor experiences that are meaningful to them, where they're engaged in it, coming up with ways to use their body in new ways, and playing outside and playing games on your tummy, not always sitting in a chair and being, forced to write things or do academics too early. Well, those are all things that parents can help with.
And you offer a lot of information in your book about other things, like what is an interactive metronome?
So interactive metronome and even our integrated listening systems program, those are tools that we use that we're certified in to be able to work with people with. The interactive metronome is a great tool where it's a rhythm program. It's actually to the beat of a metronome, but we do different timing activities. So we'll work with professional athletes in using the metronome to have better timing. It's great for concussion. It's great for stroke rehab. It's great for lots of different things that help kind of reprogram the body to be more coordinated and to be more focused. There's a lot of science behind it for treatment for ADHD in particular, but also just in terms of focusing your attention and that sequential timing that goes on in the nervous system to be able to do that. The listening program, same kind of thing. It stimulates the parts of your brain through music, and we use that as a focusing tool and combining with different exercise. That music is very much like a metronome in that there's a steady beat to it. And again, there's lots of science behind both of these tools that support their use in rehab settings.
And what about functional vision therapy?
So functional vision is really important for both, kids and adults, whether you've had a concussion or it's a developmental pediatric issue. The way your eyes work and team together is very much related to bilateral coordination. Both of your eyes have to work together effectively. We have tools that look at do the eyes track evenly across a page when you're reading? Or can you look at a board in the front of the classroom and then be able to translate it down on a page in front of you? Can your eyes smoothly track up and down to do that? And those are things that can get in the way of, after having any kind of a head injury, certainly, but with kids who get sometimes even misdiagnosed with dyslexia and attention deficits, you can tie it back to this functional vision piece. And when we treat that and strengthen the eyes to work together better, it's a lot easier to pay attention because you're not distracted by not being able to keep your place, when you're reading a book, or, keep your place when you're trying to take notes off a smartboard in front of you.
So there's so much that can be done with these children that have these challenges. And then, of course, I know that depending on what diagnosis your child is given, either more or less therapeutic modalities are available, let's say, through the school or through the community.
Right. What happens with schools is that in order to qualify for services, you often have to, and depending on the state, but be 1 or 2 standard deviations below the norm. And for a lot of kids, you can be functioning within actually a typical range, but have a big difference between your actual intelligence and how you're actually functioning that can set you up for having lots of problems with behavior, attention, and just kind of functional activities. And yet those kids don't qualify for services. So, being able to have some of these tools available for all children, whether you're severely disabled or, have a mild problem that's just getting in the way of being able to completely actualize your potential, everybody can benefit from these things. And again, which tools you use depend on where you fall on that spectrum.
So it's such a good thing to find out, because parents have to, I really would recommend you don't just go along with giving children, and as you said, very young children, pharmaceuticals, which really does not fix the problem.
Right. It just masks it. It can make it easier for the people trying to teach them, because it kind of dumbs down your nervous system a little bit. It quiets it. It makes it not, quite as restless. But if you can do that for yourself within your own nervous system through physical activities or having other options available to you, doesn't that seem like a better long-term fix than having a pill that kind of takes care of it for a couple of hours? The other problem with some of these medications is that after a couple months, they don't work as well anymore. So now you're looking for another medication to try and either complement the one you're already on or switching to something else. And there's really, you ask anybody who's gone down this road, there are no quick fixes. And yet there are people who would like a quick fix.
Oh, well, we all would like a quick fix for everything.
Yeah, but it's so complicated. We are complicated individuals. And, our goal is to set kids up to be able to really actualize their full potential throughout their lifetime. So you're building strategies, and you're building kind of the framework for your body working as well as it possibly can throughout your life.
Well, thank you so much for that, Dr. Sally. And we're talking today with Dr. Sally Fryer Dietz. She is the author of wonderful books, including Sensory Processing Solutions, Drug-Free Therapies to Realize Your Child's Potential. And thank you for being our guest, Sally.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.